Welcome back. In our previous lecture, we started the cost of capital, specifically the dividend valuation model. And I solved the question on the dividend valuation model without growth, and also another question with growth. However, there are times that your examiner will want you to calculate the cost of dividend, and you may need to calculate the growth rates. So in the last lecture, I introduced the Gordon's growth model. In this lecture, we'll be solving a question using the Gordon growth model. But just a recap, what are those things that you will see that you may want to say, oh, if I buy a dividend in this company, their dividend payments will be growing annually. What are those things that you are going to see in a question also that will make you want to calculate growth, even if your examiner did not give you the growth rates? There are times that your examiner will not give you growth rates. Your examiner will just give you information on how to calculate the dividend. So if that is the case, the first one is the Gordon's growth model. So he believes that company that retains profits and reinvest those profits, it means that their dividend will be growing over time. So if a company earns 60,000 million and retains 20,000 million, according to Gordon's, the company dividend the following year will increase because the company can reinvest this money at the company's cost of capital. But there are times if your examiner gives you a different reinvestment rate, however, you may want to use that. But the assumption is that every money that is being reinvested into the company will be reinvested, and the return on that amount will be based on the cost of the company's fund. So if that is the case, you see a situation like this where there is retention, then you know that you need to calculate growth. The examiner may not give you a question that will require retention. However, your examiner may decide to give you historical dividend, say 2020, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2021. So the examiner may give you dividend for this number of years. So you may want to check to see if the dividend will be growing. So whenever you see historical dividend, it means that you are going to calculate the growth rates before you calculate the value of the company's share using the dividend valuation model. Let's look at a question using the Gordon's growth model. So this is the formula for the Gordon's growth model. That growth is equal to retention. So this is the growth, R times B. So G equal R times B, where G equal to the growth rates, R returns on investments, and this B equal retention. Retention ratio. So the retention ratio is the retention, that's the amount retained, all over profit after tax times 100. So let's look at this question over here. NATCO retention ratio for the current year is 25%. The company's cost of capital is 12%. Calculates NATCO growth rate in dividend. So this is a very simple question. You've been given the returns, and you've also been given the returns on the investments. which is R, and we've also been given retention. So the growth rate is just simply returns times retention, which will give you 3%. Let's look at extrapolation. Extrapolation. So what is the extrapolation? How do you calculate growth rate using extrapolation? So I said earlier on that you are looking at historical dividend. So if I see a company's financial for the past 5 years and dividend is 30 naira, 30 naira for 5 years, with this, I know that there is no prospect of growth. Okay, this is in theory. Okay, when you are looking at your exam. But in practical, you may have something like 30, 29, 30, just fluctuating. Let's say 29.5, let's say 31, but just very close margin. So in practical, I may just look at it that this company is like there's no growth prospects. But if I have, say, 30 in 5 years' time, today it is 50. You can see that the dividend has grown. So extrapolation, this is the method of calculating growth based on historical data. For example, to calculate growth when giving data for 2 consecutive years, say the dividend for last year was 50 naira and the dividend for this year is 100 naira. The percentage increase can be calculated as this, which is the growth will now be equal to current dividend, which is 100 all over last year dividend minus 1. That will give you 1 or 100%. So it's just like you are calculating your percentage increase, or maybe your normal arithmetic where you are trying to calculate your profit margin. So that's just the way this is. So 100 over 1. Normally, you can also say percentage increase is equal to 100, which is what it is today, minus 50, what it was last year, all over 50, what it was last year. So the increase is 50 over 50 times 100. So this will also give you 100% or 1. Okay, but in a situation where you are giving, now we just have 2 consecutive years here, last year and this year. So it's very easy to calculate using this method. When a situation where you are giving more than 1 year, say 20, 25, 25, 28, 30, and 35. What do you do? So in this situation, you have to use the extrapolation. So this becomes your base year, while this becomes the most current year. So in this question, we just have only 2 years, which is last year, 50, and this year, 100, right? So it will now be 50. It will now be 100, which is this current year, 100 over 50 minus 1. So in this case, using the extrapolation formula, it will now be 35, which is the most recent, all over the base year, 20 minus 1. Or you have something like this, 10 minus 1. But let's look at the formula. Let's look at the way it is here. Let's just come here. DCY paid a dividend of 75 naira 5 years ago. The current dividend paid by DCY is 100. Calculate the growth rates 5 years ago. So we have 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, plus the current year, 6 years, right? So how do I calculate this? This is the formula for calculating growth rate using the extrapolation. Most recent dividend all over base dividend, n minus 1 g. Okay, so n here equal number of years. So here 1 is equal to constant. So this one is constant. Yg is equal to the growth rates. Okay, so let's plug this into the formula and see what the value, the answer will be. From this question, we're told that 5 years ago, dividend is 75. Current year, dividend is what? 100. So I'll start with the current year, which is 100 over 5 years ago, 75 minus 1. And here is 6 years as illustrated earlier. So I can just use 5 straight since my examiner has told me that 5 years ago, or I did 5 years ago. So 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So n will be 6 minus 1. But since they've been given 5 years ago, I wouldn't bother myself. I'll just bring 5 here straight. So the final answer will give me 0.59, which is equal to 5.9%. So that is using the extrapolation. Let's look at another example. So let's look at this question here. Question 3. Below is an extract from the profit or loss of long-standing co for the year ended 31 December 2019. So this is the operating profits, interest, earnings before interest, earnings before tax, dividend. So this is retained earnings. That's retention for the year. Okay. So if you are given this information and your examiner asked you to calculate the costs of equity, how do you calculate it? Remember, we have two formulas. We have the one that is KE, which is equal to D naught all over MVE, market value of equity. We have the second formula, KE is equal to D naught into 1 plus G over KE plus G. So if you have this information, which formula are you going to use to calculate the cost of equity capital? Now, if you look, the examiner didn't give you anything like growth rate, say G equal 5% or 6%. But being that you've seen this pattern, dividend, you've seen this pattern, your dividend, which is your payout, and your retention, retained earnings, which is your retention, based on the Gordon's growth model, definitely you know that you are not using the formula without growth. You are going to use the formula with growth. But in this question, you will need to calculate the growth yourself using this formula, G is equal R times B. So your examiner will not tell you that you should calculate the growth, but you will know that you need to calculate the growth rate. So let's continue. Let's scroll down a little, and in the same question, you are given historical dividend. Dividend paid in 2015 is 300, 2016, 325. So you can see that the dividend has been growing from 2015. So what is the current year? Now, it's not here, right? But we were told that this current year is what? 2019. And the dividend that has been declared, has been paid for the current year is how much? 402,500. So with this, it means that I can calculate growth rates using either the Gordon's growth model or extrapolation, historical cost. Okay, so let's look at the requirements of the first one. Required. Calculate long-standing PLC expected growth rates using this. Okay, so let's look at the extrapolation. How do you calculate growth rates using the extrapolation? We have explained that earlier on, but let's just look at it together. So from this question, this is the formula for extrapolation. This is the formula. G equal n minus 1, current dividend all over past dividend minus 1. Okay, so now from this question, what will be our current dividend? On the question here. Current dividends. Here, we didn't see 2019, so I need to come to the question. This is the current year. 31 December 2019. So this is the current year. So that means the current dividend will be how much? So this will definitely be the current dividend. 402,500. So don't go and use 2018 dividend. So that's the current dividend, 402,500. So what will be the base dividend? The base dividend will be the dividend for 2015, which is the earliest year, 2015. So this is current dividend all over this. So therefore, the growth rate will be 402,500 all over 300. So the number of years now, we have 5 minus 1. So how did I arrive? How did I arrive at 5 minus 1? So 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 4 years, including the current year, 5 years. So that takes us to 5 minus 1. So if you do this calculation, you divide this and take the fourth roots, the fourth roots, you have 1.0763, approximately 7.6. So therefore, your R will be 7.6%. But using the Gordon's growth model, your G will be 7.6%. Using the Gordon's growth model, G is equal to R times B. So now we need to get this in percentage. What was retained was 1,207,500. What was paid was 402. So what is the percentage that was retained? So let's look at it here. So it will be 1,207,500 divided by the total profits. So we say your retention ratio is retention, amount retained. So don't get that, don't be confused. Amount retained all over profit after tax. So that will give you 0.75 or 75%. Okay. So G, now your growth rate will now be equal to the return on investment, which is 10% times 75%. So that will give you 7.5%.